The shuttle ride back from Greenland had been unnervingly quiet. Alina clutched the artifact, a metallic disc no larger than her palm, with shifting symbols that seemed to change when she wasn't looking directly at them. Something about it felt familiar in a way that defied rational explanation. "You need to destroy that thing," said Captain Torres, breaking the silence as he piloted the craft through heavy Arctic winds. "Command's been clear. All artifacts are to be surrendered." Elena slipped the disc deeper into her pocket. Since when does scientific discovery require military oversight? Since that transmission hit every communications device in the system simultaneously. Torres's knuckles widened on the controls. The bigwigs are spooked. When they landed at the new Copenhagen research facility, Alina noticed the increased security. Armed guards where scientists usually roamed freely. Dr. Kari, her former mentor who'd condemned her theories as fanciful xenorchaeology, was waiting at the entrance, his face drawn. "You found something." "Not a question." She nodded. "I need access to the genomic sequencer." Kari hesitated. "Alina, the UN Security Council has classified all findings related to." "I need to know if I'm going insane, Marcus." Her voice cracked. "Because I'm remembering things that aren't my memories." The genomic lab was deserted, unusual for any time of day. Kari entered his override codes, then left her alone. Another break in protocol that spoke volumes about the chaos unfolding worldwide. Alina placed her palm on the scanner, watching as her genetic code unfurled across the holographic display. What she saw confirmed her fears. Nested within her junk DNA were perfectly symmetrical sequences that couldn't possibly be natural. Sequences encoded with data. Her hands trembled as she initiated the decryption algorithm she'd originally designed for the alien transmission. The genetic code began transforming, rendering into images that flashed through her mind more than on the screen. Tall, luminous beings surrounding a cluster of primitive humans. A judgment. A sentence deferred. Her nose began bleeding as the genetic memory cascade intensified. She saw through ancient eyes as the visitors manipulated human genetics, watched as they selected certain individuals for enhancement. They were experimenting, treating early humans like laboratory animals. The lab door burst open. 3 figures in unmarked tactical gear entered, weapons raised. "Dr. Elena Reyes, you're in possession of restricted materials. Surrender the artifact and come with us." Elena wiped the blood from her nose. "Who sent you?" "The UN doesn't deploy private contractors." The lead figure removed his helmet, revealing a face that made Elena's blood run cold. His features were human but subtly wrong. Eyes too widely spaced, skin too perfectly smooth. "We've been here all along, Dr. Reyes," he said, his voice resonating unnaturally. "Watching, waiting, judging." Elena lunged for the emergency lockdown button as the first tranquilizer dart hit her shoulder. As consciousness faded, the artifact in her pocket began to warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. The genetic memories surged one final time, showing her something crucial, a weakness in their seemingly perfect judgment. The arbiters had engineered humanity's violence, yes, but they'd accidentally encoded something else along with it. Unpredictability. Her last conscious thought was a realization. If humanity was on trial again, their best defense might be the very flaws engineered into them. The arbiter vessel hung in Earth's sky like a blade poised at humanity's throat. Its surface rippled occasionally with symbols identical to those on Elena's artifact. A connection not lost on Commander Jackson Wee as he stared at the feed from Luna Base's primary observatory. "Magnify Sector 7, he ordered, studying the alien ship's surface. "There's a pattern to these disturbances." His XO, Lieutenant Commander Diaz, looked up from monitoring global military responses. "Sir, we've lost contact with 16 more missile installations. Chinese hypersonic platforms just targeted their own command centers." "They're toying with us," Wei said, his enhanced eyes, a relic of classified genetic modifications from his Special Forces days, detecting microscopic movements across the vessel's hull. They could have disabled everything at once. On the main display, riots engulfed cities worldwide. The Arbiter's broadcast had included classified footage of government atrocities, black site interrogations, unauthorized weapons tests on uninhabited colonies, the Neptune Gate massacre that official records claimed never happened. How did they get this footage? Diaz whispered. The Neptune files were quantum encrypted in a facility that doesn't officially exist. Way's comm unit buzzed with an incoming transmission from General Harrington, the 5th emergency meeting in 3 hours. He ignored it, focusing instead on what the Arbiters had revealed versus what they'd concealed. Something wasn't adding up. If they'd been watching us all along, Way reasoned, why expose only certain atrocities? Why these specific incidents? Maybe they're the worst we've done, Diaz suggested. No, Way shook his head. The cleansing of Ceres was worse, and they didn't mention it. He pulled up a star chart. Each exposed incident occurred near a specific set of coordinates. A pattern emerged. Each location corresponded to ancient archaeological sites or places where breakthrough technologies had been developed. Places where humanity had leaped forward evolutionarily or technologically. They're not just judging us, Way realized. They're measuring the results of their experiment. The observatory's alarms blared as the Arbiter vessel began transmitting a new signal, this one bypassing all communication technologies and resonating directly in human minds. Way collapsed to his knees as images flooded his consciousness. Early humans being studied, modified, then released back to their tribes. A controlled experiment in evolution, with periodic cullings when development curved in undesired directions. When the transmission ended, Way found himself on the floor, nose bleeding, ears ringing. Diaz was unconscious nearby, along with half the command staff. "Sir," a communications officer called weakly. "We're receiving reports. The signal affected everyone differently. Some experienced nothing. Others are changing." Way wiped blood from his face, a cold realization settling in his stomach. They didn't just manipulate our ancestors. They built in triggers, genetic keys they could activate at will. His secure terminal chimed with an incoming message. Origin. Earth. New Copenhagen facility. The message contained only 2 words and a set of coordinates. FOU and here. Alina Reyes was alive, and according to the attached biometric data, her genetic structure was rapidly transforming in ways that defied scientific explanation. The Arbiters hadn't just returned to judge humanity. They had come to harvest what they'd sown millennia ago. The 7-day countdown to judgment had begun, but Way suspected humanity's fate had been sealed long before the Arbiters arrived. Elena awoke inside a sterilized chamber within Luna Base, her reflection in the observation window showing subtle changes to her features. Higher cheekbones, slightly elongated pupils. Way watched from the other side of the glass, his expression grave. "The genetic cascade is stabilizing," Dr. Amara Chen reported, monitoring Elena's vitals. "Whatever they encoded in her DNA is expressing itself more fully by the hour." Elena pressed her palm against the glass. "I can hear them, Commander. Not words exactly, impressions, fragments of thought. The Arbiters aren't a unified entity. Theirs, dissent." We nodded to Dr. Chen, who reluctantly unlocked the chamber. Against protocol, against every security measure implemented since the Arbiters' arrival, he entered and sat across from Elena. "Tell me what you see," he said quietly. "Their society is a hierarchy of judged species," Elena explained, wincing as another wave of genetic memories washed through her. "The oldest Arbiters, the first ones, they judge a species, modify the survivors, and absorb them into their collective. Each judged race becomes part of the judgment apparatus for the next. A pyramid scheme of moral superiority," Way muttered. "But there's more." Elena's newly altered eyes locked with his. "Some of the absorbed species are questioning the process. The genetic modifications they made to humanity were different, experimental. We were meant to develop along a specific path, but something went wrong, or right, from our perspective. Outside the medical bay, Luna Base had become humanity's last unified command center. Screens showed Earth's chaotic response. The Submission Coalition had swollen to billions, their members identifiable by white clothing and passive acceptance. The Final Defiance militia broadcasted increasingly desperate attack plans. Religious cults performed mass rituals at ancient sites worldwide. Wei's community displayed a message from the remaining United Earth government. They had voted to accept the Arbiter's invitation to send representatives aboard their vessel. "They're sending diplomats into the lion's den," Wei said. "No," Elena stood shakily. "They need to send me." In Antarctica, Dr. Imani Okoro fought to stay conscious as her lab's emergency oxygen dwindled. The attack had come simultaneously from human extremists and disguised infiltrators, but she'd managed to seal herself in the core research vault with her most crucial findings. The holographic display showed gene sequences from pre-Younger Dryas human remains compared with modern human DNA. The differences were subtle but profound: precise modifications to aggression centers, territorial response, technological aptitude, and tribalism. "They engineered conflict," she whispered, recording her findings onto a neural drive, despite the splitting headache from oxygen deprivation. "They created the very violence they're judging us for." Her scanner beeped, comparing the modified human sequences against a database of exobiology samples collected over decades of secret space exploration. Identical modification patterns appeared in 17 extinct species from 12 different star systems. As darkness encroached on her vision, Okoro initiated the neural drive's emergency upload protocol. If she died here, her discoveries wouldn't. The quantum-encrypted burst transmission went out, bouncing through hidden relays to reach both Wei and Elena simultaneously. In that moment, as Okoro slumped unconscious against her console, and as Wei and Elena absorbed the horrifying truth aboard Luna Base, their separate realizations converged on a single inescapable conclusion. Humanity wasn't facing judgment. They were facing harvest. The Arbiter's courtroom pulsed with a light that seemed to penetrate flesh and bone. Elena stood among the human representatives, her altered physiology allowing her to perceive layers of reality the others couldn't. The subtle energy fields connecting the Arbiters, the quantum fluctuations as they communicated in frequencies beyond human perception. Sanvi Mehta, the battlefield nurse chosen from a Himalayan conflict zone, trembled on her judgment platform as waves of pain coursed through her body. Every death she couldn't prevent, every suffering she witnessed, amplified and fed back into her nervous system. Yet she remained standing. "You claim to judge us for our capacity for violence," Sanvi said, voice breaking but determined. "Yet I've held the hands of soldiers from opposite sides as they died, and heard them forgive each other in their final moments. Where in your judgment is this accounted for?" The lead arbiter, a being of towering stature with features that seemed to shift between dozens of different species, gestured dismissively. The platform's intensity increased, bringing Sanvi to her knees. "Your compassion is an evolutionary accident." The arbiter's voice resonated directly in their minds. "A malfunction in the aggression triggers we encoded." Elena caught the slip immediately. The arbiter had admitted their manipulation without realizing it. She glanced at Marcus Chen, the reformed war criminal whose platform displayed the atrocities he'd committed before his transformation into a peace advocate. His eyes met hers. He'd caught it too. The child prodigy, Aja Okafor, just 11 years old but possessing computational abilities that bordered on supernatural, stepped forward next. Her platform alone remained inactive. "I would like to present a mathematical proof," she said with the simple confidence of youth. The arbiter stirred, clearly unprepared for this approach. One made a gesture of allowance. Aja's hands moved through the air, manipulating invisible equations that the courtroom systems translated into glowing symbols. "If we assign numerical values to moral development across sentient species, factoring in technological advancement versus ethical frameworks," the mathematics grew increasingly complex, yet remained elegant, a perfect merger of quantum ethics and developmental biology that even the arbiters seemed transfixed by. Alina recognized fragments of Dr. Okoro's research woven into the girl's equations. Therefore, Aja concluded, suffering is not merely coincidental to moral development, but mathematically essential to it. Any species engineered to experience amplified suffering would, by definition, develop accelerated ethical frameworks as a compensatory mechanism. The courtroom fell silent. A ripple of unease passed through the arbiters' unified consciousness. For the first time, their perfect synchronization faltered. The child is uncategorized. One arbiter communicated to another in frequencies they didn't realize Alina could now perceive. Her neural patterns do not match our templates. Impossible, another responded. All human variations were accounted for in the original design. Alina caught Marcus's eye again and nodded subtly. The arbiter's perfect control was showing cracks, not from humanity's technology or strength, but from something they hadn't engineered and couldn't predict, the emergent complexity of human cognition. As Aegis stepped back, the reformed war criminal moved forward to present his testimony. But Alina was no longer focused on the trial. Behind the performative judgment, she was mapping the frequency patterns of the arbiter's communications, searching for the dissonance she detected. Somewhere within their unified mind, doubt had taken root. Dr. Imani Okoro clawed her way through the maintenance shaft, the biting Antarctic cold seeping through her torn environmental suit. The neural drive implanted at the base of her skull throbbed with each heartbeat, its data payload feeling almost alive. A burning truth desperate to spread. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit had faded, but she couldn't risk stopping. The infiltrators weren't just disguised aliens. They moved with inhuman precision, tracking her by scent and thermal signature despite her countermeasures. When she finally reached the emergency communication hub, a forgotten Cold War relic repurposed for her clandestine research, her fingers were nearly too numb to activate the quantum transmitter. The ancient facility hummed to life, drawing power from geothermal taps that had remained undetected for decades. Uploading neural contents, the system announced as needles extended from the console, connecting directly to the ports in her skull. The pain was excruciating but brief. As her discoveries beamed across space to Luna Base, Okoro allowed herself a moment of horrified fascination at what she'd uncovered. The genetic modifications weren't crude manipulations but precision instruments, calibrated to activate in response to specific technological thresholds. They wanted us violent, she whispered to herself, but only in productive ways. The data confirmed her worst suspicions. By analyzing trace minerals and isotope ratios in fossils across dozens of worlds, she'd identified identical modification patterns spanning millions of years. Each species showed the same trajectory: genetic tampering, accelerated development, then sudden extinction just as they approached interstellar capability. The transmission completed, Okoro collapsed against the console. Outside, the Antarctic storm had intensified, buying her precious minutes as her pursuers struggled against nature's fury. Meanwhile, aboard the Arbiter's vessel, Commander Wei's infiltration team moved silently through maintenance conduits that seemed designed specifically to accommodate human-sized beings. Too convenient, Wei thought, triggering his tactical implants to analyze the vessel's architecture. The dimensions match human ergonomics perfectly, his second-in-command whispered. Why would they build passages sized for us? Because they've done this before, Wei realized. These aren't maintenance shafts. They're observation channels. The team reached a junction where the passage widened into a chamber. Wei's enhanced vision adjusted to the dimness, revealing what appeared to be display cases stretching in all directions, thousands of them, containing preserved specimens from countless worlds. It's a trophy room, someone whispered in horror. No, Wei corrected, approaching the nearest case. It's a pantry. Inside each case floated perfectly preserved remains, not just bodies, but captured neural patterns, quantum-locked at the moment of death. Wei's implants detected energy signatures indicating active consciousness, trapped in an eternal moment of harvest. As they progressed deeper, the specimens became increasingly humanoid. The final chamber contained empty cases labeled with Earth's coordinates and dates. Tomorrow's date. Wei activated his secure comm unit, encrypting a burst transmission to Alina. The judgment is theater. They don't want to eliminate us. They want to consume us. The arbiters feed on neural complexity at the moment of maximum development. The final piece clicked into place as Wei's scanner analyzed the vessel's material composition. The ship itself contained human genetic material. The arbiters hadn't just visited Earth 12,000 years ago. They had harvested our ancestors, leaving only enough survivors to regenerate as a new crop. And now, the harvest was ready again. Alina felt the courtroom's atmosphere shift as she received Wei's encrypted transmission. The arbiters were preparing their verdict, their collective consciousness humming with anticipation. Not of justice, but of feeding. Her enhanced senses detected something else too. Microscopic changes in the air as Dr. Okoro's data synchronized with her neural patterns. Understanding flooded through her, pieces connecting with terrible clarity. The judgment platforms suddenly felt different beneath the human representatives' feet, not instruments of justice but calibration devices, preparing their neural patterns for optimal consumption. Alina stepped forward, interrupting the lead arbiter mid-pronouncement. Every survival instinct screamed against drawing attention, but humanity's only chance lay in disrupting the ritual. "Before you render judgment," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I invoke the right of final question, a right granted to all judged species according to your own traditions." The arbiters hadn't expected this. Alina had gleaned knowledge of their protocols from the genetic memories now actively expressing in her consciousness. "You may ask," the lead arbiter conceded with visible reluctance. Alina met its shifting gaze directly. "How can beings who engineered violence into our DNA, then judge us for that violence, claim moral authority?" The accusation hung in the air like a physical force. The arbiters froze in perfect synchronicity, their telepathic network momentarily disrupted by the logical paradox. In that instant of hesitation, Wei's team executed their plan. Throughout the vessel, they activated quantum communicators calibrated to frequencies Dr. Okoro had identified as disruptive to the arbiter's neural network. But instead of attacking, they broadcast music, Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, performed by Yo-Yo Ma. The composition's mathematical perfection, combined with its emotional resonance, created a cognitive dissonance the arbiter's unified consciousness couldn't reconcile. The courtroom's walls flickered as reality itself seemed to waver. The human representatives watched in awe as the arbiter's perfect composure fractured, their forms shifting more rapidly between component species. Meanwhile, deep within Earth's massive submission coalition gathering in Cairo, Dr. Okoro, who had surrendered herself as a calculated gamble, activated the final phase. The dormant genetic memory sequence she'd identified in human DNA began awakening worldwide, triggered by a subsonic frequency embedded in global submission coalition broadcasts. Billions of humans simultaneously experienced the suppressed memory of the original judgment. They saw through ancestral eyes as the arbiters arrived not as gods or saviors, but as farmers examining livestock. They felt the terror of their forebears as many were taken, harvested for their neural patterns, while others were modified and left to reproduce, to grow more complex neural architectures for the next harvest. In the courtroom, Alina felt the psychic backlash as humanity's collective remembering created a feedback loop in the arbiter's network. The ship's environmental systems fluctuated wildly. "What have you done?" the lead arbiter demanded, its unified voice splintering into distinct tones, the component consciousnesses beginning to separate. "We've remembered," Alina answered simply. "And now so have they." She gestured to the other arbiters, whose perfect synchronization was dissolving into chaos as Bach's mathematical precision continued washing through their hive mind, creating paths for individuality to emerge. For the first time in their ancient existence, the absorbed species within the arbiter collective were remembering their own identities and questioning their role in this endless cycle of judgment and consumption. Chaos erupted throughout the arbiter vessel as Bak's mathematical harmonies continued to resonate through their telepathic network. What had begun as minor dissonance expanded into full rebellion as buried identities reasserted themselves after millennia of suppression. In the courtroom, Alina watched as one arbiter physically transformed, its shifting appearance stabilizing into a distinct form. Tall, crystalline, with multifaceted eyes that caught the light like prisms, it approached her while the others were distracted by internal conflict. "I am Kazon," it communicated directly to her mind. "My people were the Lumidex, consumed 3 million years ago. I've retained awareness within the collective, watching, waiting." Its mental voice held both ancient sorrow and fierce determination. "Your music," it created pathways through their control mechanisms. Around them, reality itself seemed to warp as elder arbiters, the original species who had begun this cycle of consumption, manifested their full power. Their forms grew impossibly large, distorting space as they struck down dissenting members. "They're desperate," Kazon explained. "The unified consciousness is fracturing." Throughout the vessel, preserved consciousness imprints of extinct species activated simultaneously, billions of minds awakening from suspended animation. Their collective mental scream shook the ship's structure, creating cascading system failures. Wei's team fought through suddenly manifesting spatial anomalies to reach the central control hub. "The ship's defenses are targeting its own systems," Wei's second-in-command reported in disbelief. "It's not a ship," Wei realized, scanning the organic-looking architecture. "It's them, their true form. The vessel is the original arbiters." His tactical display flashed urgent warnings as the vessel released automated extinction protocols toward Earth, sleek, obsidian devices accelerating faster than any human technology could intercept. "Contingency measures," Wei muttered. "They'd rather eliminate us than lose their harvest." He opened an emergency channel to Luna Base. "Prepare all remaining forces for intercept." Meanwhile, Dr. Okoro had been brought aboard the vessel by the rebel arbiters. Still weak from her Antarctic ordeal, she followed Kazon through impossible geometries toward what he called the core consciousness. "The originals exist here," the crystalline being explained. "What you see as arbiters are merely projections of their will. Their true forms haven't known physical bodies for millions of years." They entered a vast spherical chamber where pulsating organic material lined the walls. Within floating containment fields, ancient consciousness cores glowed with malevolent energy, disembodied minds so old they have forgotten the concept of individual existence. "They were the first intelligence in our galaxy," Kazon explained. "Their evolution was marked by trauma and competition, so severe it warped their understanding of existence. They believe all other consciousness exists only to be consumed by them." Dr. Okoro scanned the ancient minds with her remaining equipment. "They're insane," she whispered. "Their neural patterns show paranoid delusions on a cosmic scale." "Yes," Kazon agreed. "And they've spent eons confirming their delusions by ensuring every species they encounter fulfills their expectations." Suddenly, the chamber shuddered as the rebel faction engaged the elders in open conflict. Throughout the vessel, reality-warping weapons activated, tearing holes in space-time itself. In the courtroom, Alina felt the ship's consciousness splinter further as Bak's music created more pathways for rebellion. The human representatives, still on their platforms, found themselves unwitting anchors in this interdimensional battle, their uniquely human neural patterns somehow stabilizing local reality against the chaos. As the vessel began tearing itself apart from within, the Elder Arbiters made their final move, channeling their remaining unified power toward Earth and the extinction protocols already deployed. The extinction protocols descended toward Earth like obsidian daggers, each capable of triggering cascading planetary destruction. Commander Wei's forces positioned themselves in a desperate last stand, knowing their technology stood no chance against weapons designed by beings who had hunted stars to extinction. "All units, execute Protocol Prometheus," Wei ordered from the command ship. His officers exchanged knowing glances, not a defense strategy but a final message. Each soldier activated their modified consciousness transmitters, technology reverse-engineered from the Arbiter's own designs. Instead of firing weapons, they broadcast themselves. Raw, unfiltered human consciousness projected directly at the approaching extinction devices. The machines, calibrated to target the collective neural patterns the Arbiters had programmed in humanity, encountered something they couldn't process. Billions of contradictory human experiences, emotions, and moral complexities simultaneously. Each soldier's mind contained multitudes, love and hate, courage and fear, compassion and rage, paradoxes no binary system could resolve. The extinction devices faltered, their targeting systems overwhelmed by cognitive dissonance. One by one, they powered down, drifting harmlessly into orbital patterns. Within the Arbiter vessel, Elena, Dr. Okoro, and Kazan reached the ancient consciousness core, where the first Arbiters existed as disembodied minds. The chamber shuddered as reality warping battles raged throughout the ship. "They can't be destroyed," Kazan warned. "They've transcended physical existence." Elena studied the pulsating consciousness fields. "They don't need to be destroyed," she said. "They need to be judged." Using the ship's own systems, Elena opened a channel to the courtroom where the human representatives still stood. "We're reversing the trial," she announced. "Prepare to judge the judges." The courtroom reconfigured itself, the judgment platforms now directed at the projection of the first Arbiter's consciousness dragged unwillingly into the chamber. The human representatives, the nurse, the reformed criminal, the child prodigy, and others, took positions around them. "We have seen your true nature," Elena declared, her voice resonating with the authority of awakened genetic memory. "We have witnessed your crimes against countless species across millions of years. We have experienced your manipulation of our very essence." The first Arbiter's consciousness writhed in protest. "We cannot be judged by livestock," they raged collectively. "We are the beginning and end of all sentience." "Yet here you stand before us," Elena countered, "and our verdict is this. We judge you worthy of redemption." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. "Not because you deserve mercy," Elena continued, "but because we understand the fear that drove you. A species traumatized by evolution, terrified of competition, convinced the only safety lay in consuming all others." Dr. Okoro stepped forward with her findings. "We can adapt the genetic modifications you created, not to increase aggression, but to allow you to feel true empathy. Not to manipulate, but to heal." The human representatives, one by one, offered the same judgment: rehabilitation over destruction, integration over isolation, wholeness over consumption. The rebel Arbiters, led by Kazan, watched in astonishment. "We expected vengeance," he admitted. "That would make us like them," said Sanvi, the battlefield nurse. "We choose a different path." As the verdict was delivered, the ship itself began to transform. The consciousness core that had fed on suffering for eons was exposed to something entirely new, freely offered compassion from those it had sought to consume. "We are humanity," Elena declared, standing tall among the representatives of Earth. "We judge ourselves by our capacity for mercy when justice alone would demand extinction." The first Arbiter's consciousness, confronted with this unprecedented response, began to change, their ancient patterns of paranoia and consumption disrupted by the introduction of human empathy. The cycle that had consumed galaxies finally broke, not through superior force, but through an unexpected answer to the final warning: redemption where none was deserved.